I racked my brain and couldn't solve it. Unbridled, I dragged my feelings on a tightrope. I drew myself like the next world wonder, broken and bombed and ambushed, but standing. I hoped I grew into a purpose or a sky or someone at all, but insulation tastes like mercy. And I dreamed to find my home in people, to be their spine in delusions of grandeur, and walk their plank in an act of contrition. So I fought to see the tunnel, forget the light, because all my thoughts are fleeting and my will turns backward on an axis, because the world is burning, because someone somewhere is abiding by you, and every goodbye is an act of violence. My last one is called The Pledge. This is like very new, like I read like maybe a week ago. You can't find yourself in someone else's plans or feel the end of their rope. You can't imagine hugs or birthdays without the hunt, begging to be labeled and lined up as one. You can't earn a title you aren't afforded. No word or apex opens a portal. And weeknights are the worst, avoiding pictures and messages and signs that spell it all out. Wishing you could hold them and explain how depths take plans and all good intentions. How the walls breathe in everyone I wanted to save, but none of those people were me. I'll always wait there, behind darkness that feels like dissonance, with pain that fuels world peace. In lieu of a seat at your table, someone has to wear the width.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. So we're going to do a little Q&A. So does anybody in the audience have a question for Abba? I'm going to have you keep your mask on, but I'll come to you if you do. Okay.
What's your biggest inspiration?
Nice to be running.
I guess my biggest inspiration for my writing is probably, it's probably actually the sad things about the world and the chaos of the world, because I think that we all need to delve into that a little deeper. I think people's salvation is actually in their sadness and identifying their sadness and like going through it. So I think for me, like I'm inspired just by my own experiences with myself and like other people, and I try to just get that as real as I can on a page. And that's how I work things out for myself. So that's probably the biggest inspiration.
Ooh, 2 more questions.
So, this is kind of a follow-up to that, because I noticed that your poems are directed towards you. And I'm wondering if when you're writing a poem, I mean, it seems like some of those poems are you, and some of them are not you, there's somebody else. Do you have a clear idea of who that you is when you're writing the poem, or how does that all work?
Yes, I feel like the majority of my poems I write as myself, and then if I'm not writing them as me, they're usually inspired by somebody I know or somebody I love. So like every poem I just read was inspired by someone I love or somebody I don't love maybe. Like it's just, I try to stay as identified with my own world as possible. I think you should write what you know. I think that's sort of like a universal thing for most writers. And the thing I know the best is myself, my history, and the people in my life. So I just try to keep it focused there.
If I'm going, forgive me if I get the line wrong, and every goodbye is an act of violence? Is that about? You don't have to tell me.
Yeah. Well, that particular poem is definitely about the state of this country. It's about what's been going on for the last, I don't know, well, you could argue forever, but definitely the last, like, 10 years, I think. That poem is sort of about, like, where we are as a country, where we are as a people. And I think especially that last line for me is very connected to all the lives we've lost. It just feels like there's been a lot of senseless death and, like, harm to each other. And that poem was pretty much inspired by just where we're at.
Beautiful. I heard a connection with the horror genre in that as well.
Yeah, I try to keep those.
So I also wanted to know, what are
some of the poets that inspired you to want to write yourself?
Some of my favorite poets, I love Nicky Giovanni, definitely one of my favorites. Anne Sexton had a huge influence on me when I was in school, so that's a huge part of my writing. But actually, like, funny enough, I get a lot of my inspiration in terms of writing actually like from horror movies, a lot of the scripts and a lot of the scenarios. It's got the same, like my poetry and that genre have the same ability to me. It's like a way to work out some of the darkest, like most difficult topics. And so I bring that to my writing too. So a lot of my influence comes from like movies that I watch and just like scenarios and things that I work out as I'm watching. And then I'm able to sort of like put that back on myself and go like, how does that relate to me? And then I write from there.
Yep.
So, follow up. Favorite horror movie? Favorite horror movie? Oh my goodness.
Or current favorite. We'll say current favorite.
Well, I guess my current favorite that I'm like really into right now is the new Candyman. It was fantastic. So I've probably thought about that a lot, gone over that a lot in my mind, watched it a number of times. So I would say in terms of like new ones, like that one's in my mind. In terms of like an all-time heavy hitter that is like the source of me loving horror movies, it's definitely Suspiria, but the original one, because they did a remake. But the original one by Dario Argento, it's an Italian horror film. That's probably like the beginning of me being like, oh, this is like something bigger than just a movie.
You totally have to connect with my friend Lisa McColgan, who hosts a podcast called Stay Scary. They would love to have you as a guest. Another?
Hi. First of all, thank you. That was wonderful. And I also want to ask you again about that horror film because I was going to text it to my daughter who loves them. But you mentioned you had just written that last poem, which I really loved. And as someone who is in awe of artists, how long does it usually take you to write something like that?
Well, that particular one probably took me like 15 minutes. Yeah, I tend to like really like, I get really inspired and then I sort of just like write something. Like I'm definitely not someone who has like a schedule where I'm like, oh, write for like an hour. I'm not one of those people who's very much like, it kind of hits me and then I just like get it all out at one time. So a lot of my poems tend to be like the shorter windows for writing because it's like a burst of inspiration or energy for me.
That's awesome. I'm going to thank Ava again for sharing her poetry and another round of applause.